Now, you knew by August 2001 of al-Qaeda involvement in the first World Trade Center bombing. Is that correct? You knew that in 1999, late 99, in the Millennium Threat period, that we had thwarted an al-Qaeda attempt to blow up Los Angeles International Airport and thwarted cells operating in Brooklyn, New York, and Boston, Massachusetts. As of the August 6th briefing, you learned that al-Qaeda members have resided or traveled to the United States for years and maintained a support system in the United States. And you learned that FBI information since the 1998 blind shake warning of hijackings to free the blind shake indicated a pattern of suspicious activity in the country up until August 6th, consistent with preparation for hijackings. Isn't that so?
Do you have other questions that you want me to answer as part of the sequence?
Did you not? You have indicated here that this was some historical document, and I am asking you whether it is not the case that you learned in the PDB memo of August 6th that the FBI was saying that it had information suggesting that preparations, not historically, but ongoing, along with these numerous full-field investigations against al-Qaeda cells, that preparations were being made consistent with hijackings within the United States?
What the August 6th PDB said, and perhaps I should read it to you.
We would be happy to have it declassified in full at this time, including its title.
I believe, Mr. Benveniste, that you've had access to this PDB.
But we have not had it declassified so that it can be shown publicly, as you know.
I believe you've had access to this PDB, exceptional access. But let me address your question.
Nor could we, prior to today, reveal the title of that PDB.
May I address the question, sir? The fact is that this August 6th PDB was in response to the President's questions about whether or not something might happen or something might be planned by al-Qaeda inside the United States. He asked because all of the threat reporting, or the threat reporting that was actionable, was about the threats abroad, not about the United States. This particular PDB had a long section on what bin Laden had wanted to do, speculative much of it, in 97, 98, that he had in fact liked the results of the 1993 bombing. It had a number of discussions of, it had a discussion of whether or not they might use hijacking to try and free a prisoner who was being held in the United States, Osama. It reported that the FBI had full field investigations underway, and we checked on the issue of whether or not there was something going on with surveillance of buildings, and we were told, I believe, that the issue was the courthouse in which this might take place. Commissioner, this was not a warning. This was a historical memo prepared by the agency because the President was asking questions about what we knew about the inside. Now,
well, if you are willing to declassify that document, then others can make up their minds about it. Let me ask you a general matter beyond the fact that this memorandum provided information, not speculative, but based on intelligence information, that bin Laden had threatened to attack the United States and specifically Washington, D.C. There was nothing reassuring, was there, in that PDB?
Certainly not. There was.
At the beginning of 1998, the FBI field office in Phoenix, Arizona, investigates a possible Middle Eastern extremist taking flight lessons at a Phoenix airport. FBI agent Ken Williams initiates an investigation into the possibility of Islamic militants learning to fly aircraft, but he has no easy way to query a central FBI database about similar cases. Because of this and other FBI communication problems, he remains unaware of most U.S. intelligence reports about the potential use of airplanes as weapons, as well as other specific FBI warnings issued in the year of 98 and 1999 concerning Islamic militants training at U.S. flight schools. The counterterrorism czar to the White House, Richard Clarke, chaired a tabletop exercise at the White House involving a scenario where anti-American militants fly a Learjet with explosives and then fly it on a suicide mission toward a target in Washington, D.C. Officials from the Pentagon, the Secret Service, and the Federal Aviation Administration attend and are asked how they would stop such a threat. Pentagon officials say they could launch fighters from Langley Air Force Base, Virginia, but would need authorization from the president to shoot down the plane, and currently there is no system to do this. The 9/11 Commission would later state that there was no clear resolution of the problem at the exercise. The son of Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman, the Egyptian blind cleric convicted in 1995 of conspiring to blow up tunnels and other New York City landmarks, is heard to say that the best way to free his father from a U.S. prison might be to hijack an American plane in exchange for hostages. This will be mentioned in President Bush's August 2001 briefing titled Bin Laden Determined to Strike in the United States. A similar warning will be discovered in May of 2001, but will not be mentioned in Bush's briefing. The Indonesian chief of intelligence will later claim that we had intelligence predicting the 9/11 attacks 3 years before it happened, but nobody believed us. He says Indonesian intelligence agents identified bin Laden as the leader of the group plotting the attack, that the U.S. disregards the warning, but otherwise offers no additional details. The Associated Press noted Indonesia's intelligence services are not renowned for their accuracy. By the spring of 98, Abdul Hakim Murad, a conspirator in the 1995 Bojinka plot with Ramzi Youssef and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, was convicted in 1996 for his role in the plot. He is about to be sentenced for the crime. However, he offers to cooperate with federal prosecutors in return for a reduction in his sentence, but prosecutors turned down his offer. Dietrich Snell, the prosecutor who convicted Murad, will say after 9/11 that he does not remember any such offer. But court papers and others familiar with the case later confirm that Murad does offer to cooperate at this time. Snell will claim he only remembers hearing that Murad had described an intention to hijack a plane and fly it into CIA headquarters. However, in 1995, Murad had confessed to Philippine investigators that this would have been only one part of a larger plot to crash a number of airplanes into prominent U.S. buildings, including the World Trade Center and Pentagon, a plot that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed later will adjust and turn into the 9/11 plot. While Philippine investigators claim this information was passed on to U.S. intelligence, it's not clear just which U.S. officials may have learned this information and what they did with it, if anything. Murad is sentenced in May of 98 and given life in prison plus 60 years. After 9/11, Dietrich Snell will go on to become senior counsel and a team leader for the 9/11 Commission. Author Peter Lance later calls Snell one of the fixers hired early on to sanitize the commission's final report. Lance said Snell ignored evidence presented to the commission that shows direct ties between the Bojinka plot and 9/11, and in doing so, covers up Snell's own role in the failure to make sure use of evidence learned from Murad and other Bojinka plotters go unnoticed. CIA agent Robert Baer, newly retired from the CIA and working as a counterterrorism consultant, meets a former police chief from the Persian Gulf nation of Qatar. He learned that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was being sheltered by then the Qatari Interior Minister Abdullah bin Khalid Al Thani in 1996. However, the ex-police chief knows other details based on what Qatari police and intelligence learned when Mohammed was in the country. Mohammed was leading an al-Qaeda cell in Qatar together with Shawki Islambouli, the brother of the Egyptian who had killed Anwar Sadat, Khalid Islambouli. They also were linked to bomber Ramzi Youssef. But what worries the former police chief is that Mohammed and Islambouli are experts in hijacking commercial planes. He tells Baer that Mohammed is going to hijack some planes. Further, he is told that Mohammed had moved to the Czech Republic and has also traveled to Israel and Germany, and also had met bin Laden associates in Germany. In early 1998, Baer sends this information to a friend in the CIA Counterterrorist Center, who forwards the information to his superiors, but Baer doesn't hear back. He also would later on to claim that there was no interest in what he had to share. By spring of '98, bin Laden issues a fatwa declaring it the religious duty of all Muslims to kill the Americans and their allies in any country in which it is possible. There is an expansion of an earlier fatwa issued in '96. Ayman al-Zawahiri, the head of the Egyptian militant group, the Egyptian Islamic Jihad, is one of the many militant leaders who signed the fatwa. This reveals to the public an alliance between al-Qaeda and the Egyptian Islamic Jihad that has long been in effect. Also signing the fatwa are representatives from militant groups in Afghanistan, Sudan, Saudi Arabia, Philippines, Chechnya, Kashmir, and Tunisia. All these representatives call themselves the International Islamic Front for Jihad Against Jews and Crusaders. Terrorism specialists present an analysis of security threats to Federal Aviation Administration security officials by the spring of '98. Their analysis describes two scenarios involving planes as weapons. In one, hijacked planes are flown into a nuclear power plant along the East Coast. In the other, hijackers commandeer Federal Express cargo planes and simultaneously crash them into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, the White House, the Capitol, the Sears Tower, and the Golden Gate Bridge. Stephen Gale, one of the specialists, later would say that the analysis is based in part upon attempts that have been made in 1994 to crash airplanes into the Eiffel Tower and the White House. Gale later recalls that one FAA official responds to the presentation by saying you can't protect yourself from meteorites. On May 15th, 1998, an FBI pilot sends his superior and supervisor in the Oklahoma City FBI office a memo warning that he has observed large numbers of Middle Eastern males receiving flight training at Oklahoma airports in recent months. The memo, titled Weapons of Mass Destruction, further states that this may be related to planned terrorist activity, and light planes would be an ideal means of spreading chemicals or biological agents. The memo does not call for an investigation, and none occurs. The memo is sent to the Bureau's Weapons of Mass Destruction Unit and ultimately forgotten. It will be learned that an al-Qaeda agent had studied flight training in Normal, Oklahoma, in which hijackers Muhammad Atta and Marwan al-Shehi would briefly visit the same school in the year 2000. Zacharias Moussaoui, the alleged 20th hijacker, will train at the school in 2001. The FBI would receive reports that a militant Islamic organization might be planning to bring students to the United States for flight training at some point in 1998. The May 15th memo warns about Middle Eastern men training at flight schools in Oklahoma and Arizona. The FBI is aware that people connected to this unnamed organization have performed surveillance and security tests at airports in the United States and made comments suggesting an intention to target civil aviation. Apparently, this warning is not shared with other FBI offices or the Federal Aviation Administration, and a connection with the Oklahoma warning is not made. A similar warning will follow in the following year. Days later, bin Laden discusses bringing the war home to America in a press conference from Afghanistan. He indicates the results of this jihad will be visible within weeks. In August, 2 U.S. embassies will be bombed. Bin Laden indicates he may attack a U.S. military passenger aircraft using anti-aircraft missiles. In an interview with ABC News reporter John Miller on May 28, 1998, in the subsequent media coverage, Miller repeatedly refers to bin Laden as the world's most dangerous terrorist and the most dangerous man in the world. By June, the State Department warned Saudi officials that bin Laden might target civilian aircraft. 3 State Department officials meet Saudi officials in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and pass along a warning based on an interview with bin Laden had just given to ABC News' John Miller. In the interview, bin Laden threatened to strike in the next few weeks against military passenger aircraft and mentioned surface-to-air missiles. The State Department warns the Saudi that bin Laden does not differentiate between those dressed in military uniforms and civilians, and there is no specific information that indicates bin Laden is targeting civilian aircraft. However, they add, we could not rule out that a terrorist might take the course of least resistance and turn to a civilian aircraft target. NBC News will note that the 9/11 Commission made no mention of the memo in any of its reports, and it is unknown why the Commission did not address the warning. By the summer, bin Laden sends a fax from Afghanistan to Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman, a London-based Muslim cleric who dubs himself the mouth, eyes, and ears of Osama bin Laden. Bakri publicly relates that what he called bin Laden sports specific objections for a holy war against the United States. The instruction reads, bring down their airliners, prevent the safe passage of their ships, occupy their embassies, force the closure of their companies and banks. Noting this, the Los Angeles Times will wryly comment that bin Laden hasn't been shy about sharing his game plan. U.S. intelligence obtains information from several sources that bin Laden is considering attacks in the United States, including Washington and New York. This information is given to senior U.S. officials in July of that year. Information mentions an attack in Washington, probably against public places. U.S. intelligence assumes that bin Laden places a high priority on conducting attacks inside the United States. More information about a planned al-Qaeda attack on a Washington government facility will be uncovered in the spring of '99. By late summer, Mary Carol Tuano is appointed director of the Federal Aviation Administration's Boston Civil Aviation Security Field Office. This is the office that oversees security at Logan Airport, where flights 111 and 175 depart on 9/11. Yet Toronto has little experience in airport security and has not even begun the basic training that all FAA special agents must undergo. During her tenure, according to an agent who is assigned to Logan, staff that document security violations become frustrated as she allows these violations to accumulate without taking appropriate action. After 9/11, it was revealed that she lacks the identification badge necessary for unescorted access to secure areas. An official familiar with airport security procedures comments, an organization does well when a commander checks. And how can you check what they do if you don't have a ramp access badge? Toronto is subsequently reassigned after 9/11. By August 4th of 1998, the Egyptian Islamic Jihad had joined forces with al-Qaeda, issuing a statement threatening to retaliate against the United States for its involvement, rounding up 3 of its members, helping Muslim forces fight in Albania. The group announces, we wish to inform the Americans of preparations for a response which we hope they read with care, because we shall write it with the help of God in the language they understand. 3 days later, the bombing of 2 U.S. embassies in Africa followed. In Nairobi, Kenya, and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. By September, U.S. intelligence uncovers information that bin Laden's next operation could possibly involve crashing an aircraft loaded with explosives into a U.S. airport. The information is provided to senior U.S. officials. But U.S. intelligence hears of a bin Laden plot involving aircraft in New York and Washington. On December, it will learn that al-Qaeda plans to hijack U.S. aircraft are proceeding well, and that 2 individuals have successfully evaded checkpoints in a dry run at a New York airport. By December, according to U.S. intelligence assessment, bin Laden is actively planning against U.S. targets and already may have positioned operatives for at least one operation. Multiple reports indicate that bin Laden is keenly interested in striking the U.S. on its own soil. Al-Qaeda is recruiting operatives for attacks in the United States, but has not yet identified potential targets. Later in the month, a classified document prepared by the CIA and signed by President Clinton states the intelligence community has strong indications that bin Laden intends to conduct or sponsor attacks inside the United States. The warnings were there. The intelligence was there. It all contradicts what State Department officials like Condoleezza Rice states to the 9/11 Commission under oath that there were no warnings, that there was no intelligence, that there were no threats to the country in the year prior to 9/11. The reports, the intelligence, the threats were there for far longer.